RTGS Global. We make global liquidity visible. Real-time gross settlement systems have transformed domestic payments in many countries. However, international payments have no such settlement model and are constrained by risk and inefficiency. If we look at how an international payment is made today, the issues become obvious. Let's use an example of a manufacturer in the US that needs to pay a UK supplier £100,000. Today, the manufacturer's bank, Bank A, would ask its UK correspondent, Bank B, to fulfil the payment in £sterling. But for the payment to take place, funding arrangements must be agreed and completed first. The financial risk occurs between the banks and is not related to the US manufacturer. Often, Bank A will pre-fund its sterling-denominated Nostro account held by Bank B, exposing itself to fluctuating exchange rate risks. In other instances, if Bank A's Nostro is underfunded for the transaction, Bank B may extend credit to Bank A to cover the transaction at a cost to cover their risk. Either way, because both banks are blind to one another's liquidity position, these funding arrangements are necessary to reduce counterparty risk prior to executing the payment. This inevitably impacts the time the transaction takes and introduces various forms of risk and financial friction, challenges that are extended when additional intermediary correspondent banks are added to the process. Eventually, the interbank funding will be agreed, and Bank B can process the payment to the supplier, either directly to the supplier's account or via their domestic payment system. RTGS Global transforms this legacy transaction flow because uniquely we make interbank liquidity visible and secure specific liquidity to every transaction we process. So, let's repeat the process, demonstrating the transformations that occur using the RTGS Global environment. Every transaction within RTGS Global operates using identical rules and processes. Now, when Bank A in America asks a counterparty bank to initiate a sterling-denominated payment, RTGS Global applies an instantaneous liquidity lock on equivalent US dollar funds held in a new account called a real-time global settlement account at Bank A. This removes the need to pre-fund a Nostro account because RTGS Global validates and locks in real time Bank A's verified liquidity for the transaction, which is then available for the benefit of Bank B if the transaction is authorized. With Bank A's liquidity locked and with Bank B open to accept the payment request, RTGS Global again validates and locks £100,000 at Bank B, the amount due to the beneficiary in the UK. This becomes verified liquidity available for the benefit of Bank A, but only if the transaction is authorized. The liquidity locks can be applied between banks in as little as 300 milliseconds. With both parties liquidity locked, RTGS Global enables the two banks to finalize commercial terms on a bilateral basis. These may be governed by predefined rule sets that the banks operate and control within the RTGS Global core. The RTGS Global platform provides access to FX feeds and pricing configuration tools to each bank, enabling the banks to create their own rule sets. RTGS Global is not a party to the transaction and has no control or ownership of accounts or funds and charges no FX margin. Its role is solely to act as auditor of bilateral liquidity in a secure financial transaction. To authorize the payment, Bank A's customer, the manufacturer in America, accepts the terms of the transaction and is authenticated. This request is received by RTGS Global, and we instantly create a patent-pending liquidity block. The liquidity block message simultaneously releases the liquidity locks at both banks, whilst simultaneously binding and transfers the fund's ownership between the banks. This releases the payment, ensuring that each bank has completed its individual obligations, thereby removing Herstat or settlement risk. In accounting terms, the liquidity block message credits USD value for Bank B in the real-time global settlement account held in Bank A and concurrently credits the real-time global settlement account held at Bank B in favour of Bank A. Now the £100,000 payment is released to the beneficiary in the UK, and this process can take just 100 milliseconds to complete. The RTGS Global Liquidity Block delivers atomic settlement across both commercial and central banks using new real-time global settlement accounts, which is achieved in fiat currencies. This removes any requirement for the creation, cost and friction of introducing a cryptocurrency intermediary. Through the use of RTGS Global, all parties have time-stamped and immutably signed the transaction, ensuring non-repudiation, settlement finality, and auditability in real time that can be instantly viewed by the banks that were party to the transaction and their prudential regulators. For centuries, liquidity in cross-border payments has been invisible. Now it is visible, finally bringing the speed and certainty of domestic real-time gross settlement to a true multi-currency cross-border solution. In our world, RTGS stands for Real-Time Global Settlement, the name of the technology, process and bank accounts that power this transformation. The world's first cross-border liquidity network.